selling used cars, okay? You know, dial it back a little bit. Or if I want to embarrass them, I'll do the radio voice, which goes a little bit like this. Hi, Dallas Lowe with Golden Rule Break. So thanks for being here. I was told at one point that a good presentation ought to be like a woman's skirt. Okay, it should be short enough to get your attention, but long enough to cover the subject. So this is what we're going to try to do. Hopefully, it's short enough that we don't lose you, but long enough to sort of cover things. And I really want to. So I'm going to spend some time talking sort of about my story and all that. But I really am probably most excited or interested in doing a Q&A at the end of this, because I think you'll learn something from a dialogue or a monologue. Hopefully you can grab something from that, but I think a dialogue is, I think we learn more in that. So we're going to take, a little bit of time to go over my 52 years of life, and I get this a lot. It's okay. I look a lot younger than 52. Okay, so I've come to grips with this, and it's both a blessing and a curse, because when you're 25 and you are trying to convince people you know what you're talking about, but you look like you're 17, that's terrible, right? So I've been confused as the brother of my own children. Okay, this has happened, and then one time when I was 30 years old, I owned a home, I was married. And we had our first child, and I'm sitting at home one night, and there's a knock on the door. I open up the door, and some guy is selling magazine subscriptions, and he asks if my parents are home. And it mostly was, that comment was met with silence, and I was dumbfounded by it. And I thought after the fact, all of the clever things I could have said, like, I don't know if my parents are home. Let me call them and find out if they are. Or, are your parents at your house? But no, it was a bunch of silence, and I'm like, I don't know what to say. And then he realized, oh shoot, he's actually a good guy. Anyway, so I want to tell you a little bit about, just in starting, tell you a little bit about my family. So, picture number one, let's see if this works. Look at that group right there. So my wife is here, actually. So this is Tanya. And we have a little gift for you. So sitting on your table is, and depending on how old you are, you may or may not know what these little disc-shaped things are. So my wife is a singer-songwriter and recording artist, and we did music professionally for a long time, and we'll get into all that. But this album was released about a year ago, and so you've got one that you can take home and do whatever you'd like to with it, but also on the business card there, she's on Spotify and YouTube and all that. So if you don't have a CD player, which is likely, okay, who still plays CDs? Oh, Lord love you. Thank you. So you can pop that in your CD player. All right, so this picture is a couple years old, but my lovely wife Tanya, right there. And so we have 4 kids. My oldest, this is Bethlehem, and she is, she's 22 now, and she's a missionary in Northern Ireland. And she just met, a year ago, she met a young man, an Irish guy, and they have fallen in love, and they just got engaged a couple of weeks ago. And so we're sort of planning an Irish wedding in April of this year. And I don't know, for you fathers out there that like have daughters that you've married off, it's an interesting, the emotion of it and the thought of it is, there are things that I did not anticipate, but I'll tell you this, what it feels like to me is, there's a reason why we give away our daughters, that phrase that we give them away, because I feel like, I just love my kids so much, sorry. Like I've spent her whole life, right, caring for her and being her protector and being the one that she can come to and whatever. Now all of a sudden there's some other guy that is going to do that, and so and it's right that there's some other guy that's going to do that. But boy, man, it's something. All right, then this is Jeremiah. He's 20, and he is a year and a half into working in the business, and he. He's doing a great job. I'm very, very proud of him. He thinks about running Golden Rule Break, and he sees me do it, and he will say, but Dad, I'm not like you. Because there are ways that we are different, and there are ways that we are the same. And who knows if he's going to, he'll be generation number 4, right? And who knows if he someday is going to run the company or not. But I keep telling him, our personalities are different, but I absolutely see in him the analytical skills to assess things. He understands how things should work and flow. His mind works very, very well that way. And then, let's see, this is Ember. So a couple of things. We're a musical family, as you can imagine. So Beth plays guitar, and she's writing songs, and Jeremiah is a drummer, and he's a guitar player, and he writes songs. He's in a band with a buddy of his. Ember is the same. She plays guitar, and she's 16 now. She plays guitar, and she plays piano, and she writes songs, and she loves Taylor Swift. She thinks Taylor Swift is the greatest thing ever. And so Tanya and her went and saw Taylor when she was in Seattle, and yes, Taylor's great, whatever, but good night. We are listening to Taylor Swift a lot in our house, and I might have enough of it. But anyway, so she's 16, she's very sweet, we love her. And then this is Liberty, and Liberty is 8 now, and there is an 8-year gap between Ember and Liberty. And I won't get you into the details of all that, but it was actually intentional. And but I didn't think that at 52 I'd have an 8-year-old, and I know that the time is likely coming when we'll be at some school function and whatever, and they'll be like, "Hey, it's great that your grandpa's here." So it's a good thing I look young. And the key to looking young is a couple things. Is I try to stay immature. And then I wear boots like this and skinny jeans. So if any of you are trying to drop maybe 10 years, just be a little kind of goofy and wear these skinny jeans that look kind of ridiculous. So anyway, Liberty is great. And I don't know if she makes me feel young or makes me feel old. It kind of depends on the day. I've always, as the kids were growing up, been very physical with them, wrestling and snuggling and being close to them. And there had been a couple of times where it's like, I don't know if I have the energy to do the same thing with this 8-year-old that I did with the others. In the order of my priorities in my life, my relationship with God is number 1, then my wife, then my children. My business falls somewhere down in there. But businesses come and go, friendships come and go, a lot of things come and go. Even our children come and go, right? And I really, and this is really tangential, but really encourage you to, don't build your lives around your children. Build your life around your spouse, because your children are just there temporarily. And if things go the way that they should, they don't always. Your spouse is the one that's going to last. And so invest your effort and time into your spouse, because the other ones that we're seeing it, they're transitory. It feels like when they're young, it's like this is forever, but it just isn't forever. And then if you've given all that you have, everything to your children, then they're gone. Then what? But now, as my children are leaving, because I love my wife, and we've developed it. It's been so we've been married 25 years, and thank you, because we've invested in that thing. As the kids go away, we still have something there that's of value. All right, so I want to touch a little bit on Golden Rule Break and the history of the business. So we have been in business for 68 years, and I'm 3rd generation running the company. In 1954, my grandpa and his brother started Golden Rule Break, and certainly they had no idea, what it would grow to be or any of that. They certainly had no idea. In 1980, my dad, who's sitting right there, there you go. So in 1980, my dad bought the company, and I think mostly out of desperation. And sometimes, I'm not going to put him on the spot, but sometime you should ask him about his story because, you know, he didn't graduate high school, dropped out, didn't have a lot of drive or focus, and he was laying carpet, and his knees were starting to go. I think, that should not be emotional. Good night! But he was laying carpet. But out of desperation, because he knew his body wouldn't handle it, he talked to, you know, his uncle and bought the business. And at the time that he bought Golden Rule, it was not doing very well. He couldn't even earn a living for the first 6 months. He had to continue laying carpet during the first 6 months because he could. And growing up, for me, it was, I don't know if I would even describe it as middle class living. I mean, there were, and I didn't know the details of this, but, you know, there were times during the winter, during our snow time, that he'd pay his guys, but he wouldn't get paid. And it was not like it is today. And but when you're young, it doesn't so much matter. And I think as kids get older, it becomes more important. Like they're more aware of what you do and what you don't have. But for me, we had food on the table, and we went to a school where I had friends, and, you know, there were lots of things, and the money thing didn't matter so much to me. But so it was 10 years ago now that I bought the business from my dad, and So I'll share more about that, but I think now's a good time for me to mention something, and that is that who was here for the last CEO event with Sean Hostetter? I really liked that, and I really like these kinds of things because we get to hear these stories, and I think hopefully we're inspired by them. But I want you to know that the truth of the matter is that when we look at people that are successful and we try to glean something from them, it's really hard to do that in reality, frankly, because what we see in successful people is we see their accomplishments, or we see their position, or the car that they drive, or whatever. We see these outer things. But it's not the outer things that make a person successful. It's the inside things that do that. It's those things that are underneath the surface. And I know as I look over the course of my life, it's been the really difficult times in my life that I have grown the most, that I've learned the most, that have to whatever degree of a good man that I am, to whatever degree that is, it's not because of the car that I drive. It has nothing to do with that. So when you or when we idolize somebody and we look at them from the surface, be careful, because the answers are not on the surface, but the answers are down below the surface. And I will be, to the best that I can, I will try to be vulnerable with you and to share that stuff below the surface, because the other stuff, frankly, doesn't matter so much. Okay. So I did not grow up in the business. My first job was when I was 13 years old, and I was working at our Monroe location. At that time, we only had the one location there by the Monroe Street Bridge. I was 13 years old, and I hated it. And so I told my dad, all right, growing up with him, Lord love you, man, he taught me what to do and what not to do. Okay, so that summer of my 13th year, I told him, yeah, Dad, I'll work in the business. And it was sweeping floors and, taking tires off cars. He didn't let me do anything really important because, you're a 13-year-old kid. But it was terrible. It was hot. And I had to wear these big overalls that were part of my job was, back in the day, was to, you'd get the brake shoes, and they'd have lining on these shoes, and then it would be my job to burn the lining off of these old brake shoes. I'd run them through this conveyor belt thing. It's 1,000,000 degrees back in the corner of the shop, and I'm 13, and was awful. I do remember my first paycheck was actually $13. Was my first paycheck. I cashed it and I went and I bought some handlebar grips for my bike, my bicycle. Okay, so I'm old. I'm not this old that for a normal person you can pay them $1 an hour, but this is what I got paid for my $1 an hour. And but I don't know. You probably don't even remember how many weeks. It wasn't months, but it was a number of weeks before I said, I'm done here. And I'm not interested in doing this anymore. And so my dad said, he's like, okay, son, but you committed to working for me through the summer. So I started pulling shifts at home for 50 cents an hour. And I don't remember all of the things that I did, but I remember pulling nails out of boards and different things, whatever he could have me do. And I swear at night he was pounding those nails into the boards just so that I could pull those nails back out the next day, making 50 cents an hour. My word. Anyway, thank you for doing that, by the way. Yes, that's right. It was all because of that you did that has created the man that you see before you. Right. Okay. Thank you. So anyway, I'm a Freeman Scotty, if anybody knows our Freeman School District. In fact, I cannot believe one of my high school friends is here, Nicole. She surprised me today, and thank you for being here. That's awesome. That's awesome. So anyway, when I was 20 years old, I moved to Denver, and I'll say this: when I grew up in Valley Ford, this is a very small sort of farming community, and when you're 19 years old and you go from Valley Ford, Washington, to Denver, Colorado, when you're a young virile man, it's pretty awesome. Okay, it was pretty great. A whole world opened up to me, and I went to school. So I went to University of Colorado, the Denver campus, if you know anything about it. So it's like it's not. I never lived the college life, living in the dorm thing. I was working full time and going to school at the same time, and so it took me like 8 years to get through school. Now most people that take 8 years to get through school, they're doctors or lawyers. Not me. No. It was tough, but it's a bachelor's degree in business is what I ended up with, and I mean, because I was working full time, and there were times where I would take 6 credits or something, and like the last year or two, I was like, this is ridiculous. I can't do this anymore. I'm like in my creeping toward my late 20s, and I had buddies that graduated college when they were 22, and here I am, 25, 26, 27 years old, and so the last year was pretty intense. It was full-time school, full-time work, and that's right when Tanya and I met. And I have no idea how it is that I even survived. I mean, I couldn't do it at my age, but I went to work at 8 in the morning, and I worked till 5, and then I got in my car and I drove. So I lived in Littleton, so it's a suburb of Denver. So I get in my car at 5 o'clock and I race downtown to the campus. I'm 5 or 10 minutes late every single day to get to my 5:30 class or whenever it was. And then I'm in school from 5:30 till 10 o'clock at night, while at the same time I've just fallen in love with this woman. So I'm not going home. And so then I go to her place from 10:30 until God knows when, and then I wake up and I go to get to work at 8 o'clock. I don't know how in the world I did it, and I do know of the things that suffered. It wasn't my relationship with her, and it wasn't my work that suffered, but I did this really stupid thing. Just a couple of months ago, I logged on to the University of Colorado website, and I pulled up my transcripts. Not good. Terrible, 2 point something, and it was, so this is how I managed it. I just did really crappy in school. We could spend the next, hour talking about how valuable or invaluable school is. And I think things are different now than they were back then. but it was hard, and it was of some benefit. But my experience working, so I worked at a photography studio for about 7 years, right during those years. That actual work experience was by far the more important thing for me. I mean, it didn't, I changed industries and whatever, so it didn't allow me to gain any traction in the industry, but it taught me how to talk and communicate with people. It taught me those kinds of things that I most certainly didn't get in college. Okay, so Tanya and I get married. Okay, so this funny thing happened. So all within a month, Tanya and I get married, I graduate college, and I get fired from my job. I'm not joking, all within about a 4-week period. And I'm sure her parents must have been like, holy smokes, who is this guy that my daughter is marrying? He's an unemployed loser. But it was in hindsight, it was really great. It took me probably 6 months to get a job, and maybe it didn't have to take me that long. It's been so long, I don't remember. But it took about 6 months for me to land a job. And I'll tell you, that's not altogether the worst thing when you're newly married. We spent a lot of time together those first 6 months, and it was good. It was really good to establish that during that first year. But so then I get a job working as a recruiter, a headhunter, basically, recruiting talent out of technology companies. So it was my job, all day long to cold call into companies. Where are we at on time? Okay, all right, thank you. My wife is on. She knows how much more of my life I've got to take. So my job was to cold call potential candidates and say, hey, there's a company in Silicon Valley that's really interested in you, and can I set up an interview? Is it time for you to switch jobs or whatever? And it was a fine job. It was okay. But so Tanya is very talented musically, and I knew when her and I started dating, and when I thought, I think she might be the one, I knew pretty immediately that whoever she married would have to be all in with the music thing in her life. We couldn't be going separate ways on that we had to be united in that. And so at one point I quit my job and I just booked gigs for us. And we do Christian music, and so it's church-related gigs where I would just spend all day on the phone cold calling churches saying, hey, can I send you our CD? This is what we do. Could we come and do a concert at your church or whatever? And so it was a lot of rejection. And if I called 100 churches, if I booked 2, that'd be okay. And during those years, it was really financially, it was really rough. If I didn't book at least one thing a week, I didn't know if we would have food to eat. And I remember one particularly low time where we were getting groceries, and pulled out my wallet, and I reached for my credit card instead of the cash on my debit card. And it was one of those moments where it's like, I don't trust God to provide for me, and I will never forget looking in my wallet and deciding which one do I pull out. Because if I pull out the debit card, then we're gonna have like $20 in the account. If I pull out the credit card, then at least I've got 30 days to pay that or whatever. So it was very difficult for us. Then we Tanya gets pregnant with, so right around those years we have our first child, and then she gets pregnant with our second. And but then most of the music it's all her. She's the talented one. I'm just I play guitar, and I'm just sort of along for the ride or whatever. It all really hinges on her. So she's like, we're trying to do gigs, and she's like 8 months pregnant, And so we decided there's going to be a point where we need to stop this. But like I said before, if we missed 1 week, we were in serious trouble. So I decided to go. I contacted a temp agency to try to find some temporary work for 3 months or something. And so I call this temp agency, and they evaluate me, and I do these little tests and whatever. And then I get this call from temp agency, and they're like, we have this really great job. pays $22 an hour, and this was 1998 or 99 or something. That's big money, right? And it's in the accounting department at the Spokane, or not, the Denver Transit, so the bus system there. And I'm like, hey, that's great, I'll take it, And then I get a call like an hour later, and we're like, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, I told you what our billed amount was, not what we're paying you. So it was like $10 an hour, and when they said it was in the accounting department, they should have said it was in the counting department. So this is what I did for like 3 months, was they had like half a dozen of us in this room, and we took the dollar bills that came in and we unfurled the corners and we faced them all the right way and stacked them so they could go through the counting machine. And this is what your, investment in my college career, and that's what it got me. And it was a crazy place because they hire, inexperienced people like you just folding dollar bills or unfolding dollars. So they make you, so the first day I show up this thing, I'm wearing a tie, I'm wearing, I'm looking pretty good. And I think it was like this skinny pink tie that, was very fashionable back then. I show up and they make you put on this jumpsuit. They make you climb in this jumpsuit with all the pockets sewn closed, with this Velcro strap around your neck so that you don't take wads of dollar bills and stuff them in your pockets and stuff. So, and you go into this, you go through this door, and the door shuts, and you're in this holding area. It's like, serious security, and then you can't open this door until this door closes, and so we're all standing there in our blue jumpsuits, and then the other door opens up, and you sit there for like 8 or 9 hours, unfolding, dollar bills and stuff, and money is filthy, terrible. Anyway, so I did all sorts of stuff like that growing up, and in my 20s and 30s. So it was around 2004 that we decided to move to Spokane. And this was a pretty big move for us. We decided to take a break from doing the music ministry thing. And I got just a regular job. I worked at Global Credit Union in the HR department. And it was a good job for me. It was good to have a break from the stresses and the pressures of those financial pressures that we felt. And so we had a couple of years where things were sort of normal for us. But we always knew and had a vision to go on the road and travel doing the music and different ministry things around the country. So we ended up buying an old bus, an early 70s Greyhound bus that broke down a lot. And but before we could even get on the road, it needed to be rehabbed. We had pulled all the seats out of it, ripped everything down to the bare metal, and built a mobile home out of it, or an RV out of it. This was a very difficult time for us because I did not have the skills to do any of that. And there were a lot of ups and downs during those couple of years where people thought that we were crazy, thought that we didn't know what we were doing, criticized us for doing what we were doing. We had, like, at one point, there was one guy that worked construction, he was like, you know what, I think I could do this whole thing for you. I won't charge you anything for it. I'm like on this huge high, this is great. And then he worked maybe 4 or 5 hours, and that was it. And then it was this deep, deep valley. And at one point, we had a very good friend of ours, an older guy that we admired and respected. He sat me down and he said, Dallas, if this was God's will for you, it would not be this hard. And that was really tough for me to hear. Because here I am, scratching and clawing and trying my best to do what I felt God was calling me to do, and then somebody who I respected saying, you know what, if you really heard from God on this, this would be much easier. This brings up a really important question that you all have to ask yourself as you do difficult things. How do you know when to kick the door down, or how do you know when you take that closed door as an indication that you need to start doing something else? That is very, very hard to know. Couple of pointers on this. First, are the plans that you have, are they similar to something that has worked in the past? Just from a purely practical perspective, if you're going to do something that takes some risk or something, have you already done it on some level, and have you succeeded through that? It's sort of like opening this location here in Post Falls. So we're about a month away from opening a location there at Celtice and Highway 41. And I think to myself, okay, we already know how to do this. We have 3 successful locations. So the amount of confidence that I have that this 4th location will go and will be successful, whatever, my confidence in that is pretty high because we've already done it. Second thing is seek counsel to people that you respect. Now this is a tricky one because other people get it wrong. They can give you wrong advice, right? Then you also have to be very careful about going to people that like you so much that they will just tell you what you think that you want to hear because they want to be supportive. So the supportive thing is to say, you can do it. You can do it. Well, maybe you can't do it, and you need somebody to give you a reality check. And you have to wade through all of that. And thirdly, if what you're about to do, if it completely fails, how bad will it hurt you? And I tend to be the type of person that says, I probably won't do something that if it fails, it's going to destroy my business. I hate this phrase, go big or go home. I hate that phrase. It's ridiculous. It's oftentimes foolish. Now, take risks, yes, but calculated risk. And again, ask yourself, if this completely falls flat, is it going to destroy my business? Is it going to destroy my family? Is it going to destroy my life in some way? And if the answer is yes, then be very, very careful about it. So how did I and how do I, in addition to these kinds of things, how do I know whether I ought to continue pushing forward or whether I should change direction? So as a Christian, the well that I go to for wisdom and understanding is my relationship with God. Okay? And it's been a lifetime spent submitting myself to God's will instead of trying to conform God into the image that I want Him to be. And when you hear me say this, some of you, that might resonate with you. You might be like, oh, I get that. I'm a Christian believer, and I know what he's talking about. Some of you might have no idea what I'm talking about. In fact, you might think that I am crazy for that. And this is okay, because we all get, it is our job and our responsibility to hear things and evaluate them. And some of the things that we're going to hear are good and right, and some of them are trash, and we should leave them behind. But each of you get that opportunity to evaluate the things that you hear. Now, what I don't want you to do is listen to what I'm saying and not consider it. Okay? If you dismiss it out of hand, then you run the risk of making a mistake. So you don't have to believe what I say, and this, in particular, the story I'm about to share. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to understand it. But I'd ask you to at least listen and wrestle with it some. So, like I said, I was working at the credit union. We also took a job on staff at the church where we were leading music and leading the youth department there. For the first time in my life, we had more money than what we needed to spend. We were probably $1,200 a month extra than what we needed to spend. Now, all that money was going into this bus, and it cost, I don't know, probably $25,000 to get this bus done. But there were those couple of years where I felt that relief from the pressures associated with always living on the edge. And so it's been my habit for the last 25 plus years to at least once a year to try to get away by myself in isolation to pray. And just to sort of like be with God, commune with Him, and seek direction for questions I have in my life, whatever it might be. Well, so right during that time, I got away. And a very unexpected thing happened to me. I had, for all of my adult life, I had been very focused on surrendering my will and purpose to God's will. Okay? I remember sitting in this cabin, having felt for the last year or so the relief that came from having some money in the bank. And I told God, I don't want to do this. I don't want to take on what I know it's going to be. I know I've been in this cocoon of peace and safety for 2 years, and I really like it. And I don't want to give it up. So I was there for 2 or 3 days, and these thoughts were going through my mind out there in that time. And as the days went on, I came to a moment where I myself could not believe that I was saying this, that I was that close to saying no to God's plan and purpose for my life and doing what I want to do because I felt better about it, because of money and security and all these things. And it was a moment where, and it's a classic moment, and again, some of you might not understand, but it is a classic salvation moment that I had. And if you don't understand the words I'm using, it's okay, but let me try to explain. When you look God in the face and you decide, make a decision that my purpose is no longer the purpose that I'm going to live for, but it's the purpose of someone greater than me, you give up all of that selfishness. And I did that when I was 5 years old. I mean, I've been in church and I've been walking with God for a very long time. But this moment was like a crossroads for me. And I was like, I don't want to do it. But I did. And I said, okay, God, I will again choose to do what you want me to do. And it was funny, I came home from that, and I said, babe, I got saved. And she's like, what? What do you mean? But it was that same thing that when you face God for the first time, when you make that decision to turn from yourself and turn toward God, it felt that same thing to me. And when I was at the credit union, I was receiving so much favor there. I started as a temp employee. They created a position for me after that temp position was done. I was reporting directly to the COO of the company, and they really loved me there. I could have done, I knew that I could create a fantastic career for myself there. Decided, no, I will give that up. Ironically enough, 6 months later, they went through a bunch of layoffs. I totally would have been let go. I totally would have lost my job. So we go on the road, so this is funny. So I felt this really wonderful mix of confidence and terror, because of the confidence of, yes, I know what I should be doing, but reality is very scary, because yes, I know what I should be doing, but actually, playing it out is an entirely different story. So this reminds me of, I went skydiving a few years ago. Has anybody gone skydiving here? It's an experience, isn't it? Yeah. So this reminded me when I went skydiving, because you know that you're going to be okay, right? Statistically, you know you're going to be fine, right? But that doesn't stop you from having the bejesus scared out of you, right? So I have this video that I want to show you. This is the video of me skydiving. So it's a tandem jump, And, okay, we got 25. We're doing good. Doing good. All right. So it's this tandem jump where you're strapped to the instructor. And I started having these really irrational thoughts. I thought to myself, what if he forgets to strap us together? I'm like, and then he strapped us together, and I'm like, there's no way he would forget to strap. We are really strapped together. There's no question about it. Plus, before we go up in the plane, he says, okay, Dallas, so do I have your permission that when we get up there, if you start saying, no, do I have your permission to just throw us out of the plane? And I said, yes, you have my permission. This was not the first person he had taken up there, because this is what happens when you are like, okay, the door of the plane is open, it's very loud, and you're strapped to this guy that is going to throw us out of the plane. All right, so it reminds me of this mix of fear and confidence. Okay, so watch this. All right, there, yeah. Okay, look at that. That is terrible. I have no idea. It's like, I know I can't stop it, but look. And I'm look at that guy's face. He looks even more afraid than me, right? Because he knows that he's coming next. But okay, so the guy's behind me, and we are about to jump out of the plane. And okay, so here we go. All right. He's all like, put your feet together. Oh my goodness, look at that. That's terrifying. All right, so you've just made that huge decision that you know that you should do, and but it's look at my face. Look at that. Okay, and now you're like, okay, I did it. All right, I did it. All right, so now look. All right, now look at that. This is the goofiest picture of me I've ever seen. But so this is after you take that leap. And then you see it succeed and whatever. So, the terror turns into that. Look at that goofy little thing. So, all right. So, let me show you a picture of our bus. So this is the bus that we lived in for 4 years with the kids. And, yes, it is stuck. Okay, so this is in Denver. And you can't see, but the church that we were going to stay at, so we stayed in like church park. We parked in church parking lots, and because we couldn't afford to have, go to an RV park, and we had no money, right? Very little money. And so the church that we're staying at is right over here, and the only way to get the bus into this little back alleyway was to try to come in, perpendicular to the road. But this road is like 1 million years old and has been paved over, I don't know how many times, and it's this huge crown. We literally got stuck right there. And so we called this church, and the pastor and his wife there, we love them to death, they're great, but we call this the Bus Stuck Church. So when the kids were like, hey, remember the Bus Stuck Church? This is right next to the Bus Stuck Church. So this is the bus that we lived in. The kids' rooms were down here. Okay, so the luggage bays, we created a space down there. We cut a hole in the floor and with a little hatch, and the kids would climb down there, and they had beds, and it was carpeted and whatever. So anyway, it was fantastic. But look at that. We still have that bus. It's sitting on our property. In fact, my son, so who's 20, is moving into that bus in about a month. We are sort of like rehabbing it, and he's moving out of the house, and he's moving into the bus. So, all right. So we spent 4 years on the road, doing a combination of things, doing music, as well as my primary role when we were on the road was to coach churches in how to do outreach, evangelism. How does a church in this day and age, where church, frankly, for most people is completely irrelevant to their lives, how does a church positively impact their community? So churches around the country would bring me in to discuss with them, all right, how do you actually get the people in the church mobilized to let the people in the community know that there's help there for them, and that it is possible to have a relationship with God. So it was a combination of those things. The music, so we did concerts and different things in churches and homeless shelters and different things. And then this other thing where we were coaching churches. So it was 4 years of doing that, and then I get this call out of the blue from my dad. And he had run Golden Rule for 33 years, and it was time for him to retire. And I've never been interested in the business. I'm like I said, not a mechanic, I'm not a car guy, I don't even like cars, right? And I always felt that my calling was to do ministry, was to serve God full time in doing ministry. So the business had no interest to me. In fact, I don't know if you remember this, but he tried to bribe me. And you probably didn't think you were doing this, and he's shaking his head. He's like, no, I didn't do that, son. Anyway, so what he said, something along the lines of this. He's like, son, I think you'd be surprised at the amount of money that the business is making right now. It's a good opportunity.
I said, look at the numbers.
Look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. That's basically the same thing. Look at the numbers. And that's a bribe, Dad. That's a bribe. So I remember we were working with a church in Nebraska at the time, and Tanya and I prayed about it all that. We talked about it all that night, and one thing led to another, and 3 months later we moved back to Spokane, and I spent a year working for my dad, just to who are these employees? What's the company like? What's a brake pad? What's a caliper? I had no idea. I mean, you should have seen me. My first week on the job, I went to Wikipedia and I printed out. I went to braking systems and I printed out these. Then I hung them. I taped them to the wall. And I had this makeshift office in my garage, and I had these little Wikipedia articles, taped to my wall. So sometimes people will ask me, so what does running a Christian ministry have anything to do with running a business? How in the world are you in the least bit qualified to run a company based upon what you've done in the past? And I tell you this, and I believe it 100%. When you're in ministry, it's all about people. And when you're in business, it's all about people. It is all about people. And it was so many years of not being able to fire people I went to church with, right? You can't do that, right? So since you can't fire them, you have to work with them. And when there's conflict and problems that arise, you have to solve those problems. You can't just walk away. You can't just fire them. And that has been so helpful in the business, whether it is a problem that we've had with a customer or a problem with employees. In fact, when I first came into the business, I thought, certainly the hardest part about owning a business is getting customers, right? That has got to be the hardest part of owning a business. And I think that might be the case if you're starting something from scratch, 100%. I mean, and especially if you're doing it yourself, you got to get people in the door, right? Coming into something that was already established, it was not hard getting customers. Employees, 100%, are the most difficult thing that I faced. And we've gone, in 10 years, we've gone from 9 employees to we're at 24, 25 employees right now. And the complication associated with that has been tremendous. I do want to wrap up because I do want to have some Q&A time where we can maybe, if you have questions, I want to be able to answer those, and I want to hear sort of your perspective on things. My life is so different now than it was back then. And it's an interesting thing because we want peace and safety. We want security. But we also want to be people of quality character, and we want to be strong, and we want to be admired, or we want to be good at what we do. We want all of these things, while at the same time, we want, just naturally, we want it easy. And I'm telling you, all those years of struggle and all that, that's all that, like I was saying in the beginning, that is all that stuff that's down below here that nobody sees. Tanya saw it, my kids saw it, But it is all that stuff down below that is so important that, and please don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to paint a picture for you that I have it all together or that whatever, but I'm telling you, to whatever degree that I do know what I'm doing or have some sense of it, it's not because of the success that we've had at Golden Rule. It mostly is the difficulty and the struggle that we went through. Sometimes I think about Abraham Lincoln, and I'm like, Abraham Lincoln would never have become, probably between him and Washington, our greatest president that we ever had, he never would have been that if it weren't for the Civil War and what he went through. And sometimes you get to choose to go through difficult things because you take on challenges, and sometimes those difficult things are thrust upon you. But you get to choose how you respond to that. Okay? So there have been times where my life, like I said, is far more complicated than it used to be in a lot of ways. I've been sued by a former employee. Okay? I've been extorted for money because a guy knew I had money and he held that and he literally extorted me for money. I've been misjudged. I've been misunderstood. I've also been an idiot. And I've been insensitive to my wife and to my children. And I want you to know that it's okay that all those things have happened if, and this is a big if when I do wrong, I correct the wrong that I've done. You can't just do wrong and expect it to be okay. You need to correct the wrong that you've done. If that means going to somebody and apologizing or reparations or whatever you need to do, doing the wrong isn't as big a deal as correcting the wrong. And then also, when I am wronged, I try my best to seek justice and mercy and not vengeance. And that is a really important distinction, because when I was being sued, I'm talking to my attorney and I'm like, we could go after this guy, we're going to countersue, we're going to run him into the ground, we're going to do all da. And I'm like, we gotta be careful. It's one thing to resist evil or resist somebody that comes against you and stand for righteousness and justice, and it is a different thing to seek revenge. And so I just want to encourage you that it really is all that stuff down below that is hard to see and it's hard to live through, but it's the very thing that make us better if we let it make us better. So, all right, questions, comments, thoughts? We have 10 minutes. I should have had people seating in the audience that would not. Yeah, go ahead.
So it seems to me that small churches and small businesses would probably have similar problems. I'm wondering, is there anything from evangelism that could possibly help with marketing?
Within the context of church or within the context of a business?
Well, churches have a message and they're trying to let people know the good message. It seems to me that small businesses are also in a similar situation, trying to let people know.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so that's a good question. Here's how I would answer that, is that when you're in church and when you're doing Christian ministry, it's not about elevating yourself. Okay? It's about elevating God. And the same thing is true in business. And I really would encourage you to read this book, Story Branding. Who has read this book, Story Branding? Great book, huh? Great book. Okay, so the gist of this book is that as business owners, as we look at marketing, it is our tendency to create us as the heroes of the story. Okay, so the whole book takes Hollywood and how Hollywood crafts a story and applies that to how we present ourselves as businesses in marketing. So of course, I think Golden Rule Break is the greatest company that's ever, so I think we're amazing, right? You don't want to position yourself that way. What you really want to do, and it's the same thing in ministry, you're not positioning, you're not elevating yourself, you're elevating someone else. So this book, Story Branding, talks about you want your customer to be the hero of the story, and you want to be the guide that solves the hero's problem, that comes alongside the hero and helps them accomplish whatever obstacle or challenge that they're facing. And you'll see this over and over again in Star Wars with Skywalker and Yoda. There's always that sort of like, here the hero is struggling and that's who you're rooting for, but there's always that person that comes alongside. And that's how we want to position it's a very successful way to position our businesses in the eyes of the community, because people don't care. The people don't care about your business the way that you care about, but they care about themselves. Does that answer your question? Have you read that book?
I just got it today.
Oh! Get at it, man. It's awesome. All right, next. Yes?
Maybe just a moment or two on patience. I think you shared a couple of really important moments, the debit card versus the credit card, perhaps getting stuck on the bus, right? Having this very important decision about where to take a career. Any advice on just patience in general? We have competing priorities so much. Nice to listen to that. Maybe give us
Yeah. So I think it speaks to the phrase that I hate, go big or go home. Because when you start thinking that way, you then don't have patience. You think that you have to make a move right now. If I don't make a move right now, then I'm not going to be successful. I mean, I had this come up in the last few years. There was a piece of property in Laurel Lane that I spent 2 years working with the owners of this property to put a golden rule breaker. It was right on the freeway. It's an amazing location. It would be awesome. And it fell through. And it was okay that it fell through. Because my success doesn't come from, most of the time, it does not come from, frankly, making quick decisions. It's wise decisions, patient decisions, spread out consistently over time. Now, there are certainly times where an opportunity presents itself, you got to jump on it, and then my stress levels go up then. But sometimes you have to do that, right? But slow and steady wins a race. Yeah. Next, there was somebody. Yeah.
So going back to working at Global and working for a company and now owning a company and the reflection that you had then, do you ever find yourself going back to, not so much the money side, but just the look of the lifestyle that you have now compared?
So I don't totally understand your question, but I will tell you this, I was not probably the best employee. When I look at, as a business owner, what I'm looking for in an employee compared to the kind of employee that I was, it was, our lives have been a roller coaster. And all of that roller coaster gives perspective. And I'm really glad that we went through that time of being, having a boss and being underneath that, in that sort of, most of my adult life, frankly, I've been the boss. Well, and Tanya and I together doing the ministry or running the business, but everybody is accountable to somebody. Okay? And if you don't think, if you're the owner of a business and you don't think you're accountable to somebody, you're in big trouble. The way I see it, I'm accountable. God. Okay, all right. So God, I'm accountable to my wife, but in a business, I'm accountable to my customers, right? Because they will take any opportunity. If we mess up, or we say, if I say something not quite right, or my guys say or miscommunicate something unintentionally, they think we are crooks, right? They don't give us the benefit of the doubt usually, especially in our industry where it's like we're not known as an industry of being, honest, right? Which frankly I think is fantastic because it's easy to, when you are honest, it's easy to set yourself apart. And I'm not saying that everybody in our industry is dishonest, but if there's that impression there at least, then it's much easier to shine bright in the darkness than to shine bright in the middle of the day. It's the same thing that I think what we faced when we were on the road and we were coaching churches. It's like, it was easy because most churches don't do much of anything to reach their community. So if you can grab one church that has just a little bit of like, I think we should be doing this, but they lack the leadership in it, you bring in some leadership to a little bit of willingness, and you make a huge impact. And you're making that impact because nobody else is doing it. So, next. Yeah.
So you talked about people being the hardest thing, and and you grow your team from 9 to 25 at a time when people are having a hard time recruiting. Can you share a little bit of the work culture and how you're succeeding?
Yeah, that's good. So if you treat your employees well, then everybody knows somebody. And there are two main ways that we've found success in getting employees. Number one has been you treat your employee well, then and every time. I even prep my new employees and I say, listen, in about a month, you and I are going to have a conversation about who do you know. Okay? I give them enough time for them to know they've got a good thing here and that we can make lots of money and I'm going to treat them with respect and whatever. And then you cull those future employees from the relationships of your current employees, 100%. But you have to be sincere about it because people know. People know. You're not going to fool people. You might fool them for a little bit of time, but rubber meets the road after a month or 2 months or a year or two. There comes a point where if you're not treating your employees with genuine kindness and thoughtfulness, they know. And they're not going to recommend to their friends to come to work because they don't want to be there either. But then the other thing is they don't want to recommend somebody that they don't know is good. And I've had employees say, I know a guy, but I can't do it. I can't give you his name. Well, I'm all at once disappointed because I need names, but then at the same time, I'm like, thank you, because I can spend months figuring out what you already know. And then just from a practical perspective, the next thing as far as getting employees is we've been doing some Facebook posts and spending some money promoting Facebook posts, and we're doing radio spots that are specifically asking for candidates, and I'm doing a signing bonus, $2,000 signing bonus for employees right now, because $2,000 is a very small amount to pay when you realize that employees are the lifeblood of what you do, that you could not function without them, and I'm acutely aware of that because I can't do it myself. If we're short-staffed at one of our locations, I can't go and fix brakes. So it's all the more important that I have the right people in place. Good. Do you want to ask me a question right now, or can we talk about it later? Is this something about home, or?
I just want to add that it's not without some weeding and some firing.
Oh, yeah.
That actually does have to happen for growth sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's hard, but it's necessary. And it's coming from the employees that give their voice, and when they feel heard, oh, you understand what this person is doing to our entire ecosystem here. As a boss, you understand that and you do something about it. That's really important.
Yeah, I've had to fire some really valuable people. And most employees think they're valuable because of the amount of work they put out. And yeah, right, they're valuable because of that. But the intangibles are so important to us. Like, do they get along? Do they help create a good culture here, or are they doing the opposite of that? And I've had to fire some really productive employees. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
Where do you get your sayings for your billboards?
Yeah, good question. I keep my ears open all the time. And when I'm surfing Facebook too much, I just tell Tanya, babe, I'm just looking for those good quotes. I'm not looking at cat videos or anything like that. No, and then people will, customers or people will give me suggestions and whatever. It's amazing. It's 2 messages every week. And I've got a file of 11 years worth of, and there's some gems in there. There's some that are not that great, but just keeping my ears open. Good question.
What's your favorite one?
My favorite one. Okay, all right. So we'll end with this because it's kind of funny. So a couple of years ago, I put up this message that said, "If attacked by a mob of clowns, go for the juggler." I didn't make that one up, but I used it. And that week, I got a hot letter from a juggler. A 2-pager. I am not joking. A 2-pager. She was so upset. Couple things, she said. She did not appreciate the inciting of violence against jugglers. And she also said that she wanted to make it clear that not all jugglers are clowns, okay? This is an ancient art, okay? And so we get this letter. I call all the guys and I'm like, you won't believe this letter we got. So we laugh about it and whatever. Then I put my serious face on and I call this lady. And I say, I in no way intended to disparage the reputation of jugglers around the world. I'm sorry. And I said, even my son, Jeremiah, I'm like, he juggles. We like juggling. And she's like, well, so my husband and I, every week, we're down at the YMCA and we juggle. And I'm like, I go down there. I go down there on a Saturday with Jeremiah. We meet and we shake hands and we buy some juggling balls from this lady. And that was like on a Friday or Saturday or something. Sunday morning, I get a call from Doug Clark. Do you know who this is? He writes for the Spokesman. And I don't know how he got my phone number. And he leaves me a message. He's like, Dallas, hey, this is Doug Clark calling from the Spokesman. I keep getting these phone calls and these letters from this juggler. Just wanted to let you know I'm on your side. Give me a call. She contacted the paper after we went down and bought the juggling balls and whatever. So he totally did a write-up on this and whatever. We got all sorts of wonderful press from it, and he made her out to be kind of a, and rightfully so. She was very sweet, and I met her husband, so anyway, so that's one of my favorites right there. And actually, a few weeks later, I did this message that said, jugglers that open the door for you offer you a nice jester. So I poked the bear a little bit. All right, thank you, everybody.
Dallas, I appreciate your vulnerability and your story, and I hope all of you got some nuggets out of that. I really love this series. I think that a lot of people don't know what to expect. Like a lot of you, it was new your first time. And we have another one in November. We may or may not continue this series. It makes me sad that the attendance has been a little bit low. So tell your friends about today if you got something out of it, and then tell us if you want us to continue it next year. I'd like to know. I personally really love hearing your stories and going out and kind of applying